A potato convinced half the population to move to America. A fungus, not a war, not a dictator, not some ethnic cleansing campaign. A microscopic organism that ate potatoes. And because of it, half of Ireland disappeared. In 1845, Ireland had a population of 8.5 million people. By 1901, only 4.4 million remained. Nearly 4 million people simply disappeared. Where did they go? 1 million died, 2 million fled, and the rest? Never born. This is the story of how Britain watched Ireland starve while shiploads of food sailed past dying children on their way to England. And yeah, it gets worse. Mid-1800s. Ireland isn't a country. It's a British colony masquerading as part of the United Kingdom. The Act of Union in 1801 made it official. Ireland was British territory, which meant British laws, British landlords, British profits, and Irish people. They got scraps. Here's the setup. Anglo-Irish landlords, most of them living comfortably in England, owned vast estates in Ireland. Irish tenant farmers worked the land, but owned nothing. No rights, no security, just endless rent they couldn't afford to pay. So what do you eat when you're dirt poor and the landowner takes everything you grow? Potatoes. The potato was perfect for Ireland. Hardy, nutritious, calorie-dense. You could grow it in terrible soil. A family of 6 could survive on a small plot. By 1845, nearly half of Ireland's population relied almost exclusively on potatoes. The other half ate them regularly. A typical family consumed about 8 pounds of potatoes per person per day. 8 pounds per day. That's roughly 80% of their calories. Everything else, exported to Britain as money crops. Wheat, oats, barley, butter, beef, all shipped across the Irish Sea, while Irish families ate nothing but potatoes. And here's the kicker. Ireland was only growing 1 or 2 varieties. No genetic diversity, no backup plan. Which meant, when the blight hit, the entire food supply collapsed overnight. September 1845. Farmers across Ireland wake up to a nightmare. Their potato fields, healthy and green the day before, are now black, rotting. It wasn't just the colour, it was the smell. A heavy, sickly, sweet stench of rotting vegetation that hung over the entire island. If you smelled that, you knew your children might not make it. The leaves wilted, the roots turning to mush. The culprit? Phytophthora infestans. A water mold that probably hitched a ride from North America on a cargo ship. Thrived in Ireland's cool, wet weather, spread like wildfire. Within weeks, half the potato crop was gone. Just destroyed. 1845 was bad, but people survived. There were some reserves. Some landlords provided relief. The British government repealed the Corn Laws, tariffs on grain that made bread prohibitively expensive. Prime Minister Robert Peel imported Indian corn from America. Set up relief commissions. It wasn't enough, but it helped. Then, 1846 hit. The blight came back. Stronger, faster, more devastating. This time, the entire crop was wiped out. Almost total failure. And that's when people started dying. But here's where this stops being a natural disaster and starts being something much darker. June 1846. Peel's government collapses. Lord John Russell becomes Prime Minister, and Russell brings in a guy to handle Irish relief. His name? Charles Trevelyan. Assistant Secretary to the Treasury, hardcore believer in laissez-faire economics, and a man who genuinely believed the famine was God's punishment for Irish laziness. I'm not exaggerating. Trevelyan literally wrote that the famine was the judgment of God sent to teach the Irish a lesson. He called it an effective mechanism for reducing surplus population. This is the guy in charge of saving lives. Trevelyan's policy? Simple. The government would not interfere with the free market. Ireland needed to learn self-reliance. In plain English, London decided to sit on its hands and watch a country burn. Public works projects were set up. Starving people could break rocks for pennies, build roads to nowhere, all while they grew weaker from hunger. And the cost of relief? Placed entirely on Irish landowners. But here's the thing. While Irish people were dying of starvation, Ireland was still exporting food. 1847, the worst year of the famine, known as Black 47, Ireland exported massive quantities of food to Britain. Peas, beans, rabbits, salmon, butter, grain, livestock. In the first 9 months of 1847 alone, over 822,000 gallons of butter were shipped from Ireland to England. Up to 75% of Irish soil was devoted to wheat, oats, and barley. All exported while people starved. British soldiers guarded the shipments, made sure none of it stayed in Ireland to feed the hungry. One historian put it perfectly. Although the potato crop failed, the country was still producing and exporting more than enough grain crops to feed the population. But that was a money crop and not a food crop, and could not be interfered with. Interfering with exports would violate the sacred principles of free market economics. Can't have that. So the food left, and the people died. 1847. The death toll skyrockets. At least 400,000 people perished that year. Starvation, typhus, cholera, dysentery. Diseases spread like plague through weakened populations. Lice-carrying typhus bacteria infested the poor. Contaminated water caused cholera outbreak. Entire villages were wiped out. The western and southern regions, where Irish was the dominant language, were hit hardest. People called it an drochshaol, the bad times. And Britain's response? Trevelyan insisted Ireland needed to pay its own way. In October 1846, he wrote, "It forms no part of the functions of government to provide supplies of food or to increase the productive powers of the land." Translation: not our problem. Landlords, desperate to save money and unable to support their tenants, began mass evictions. Can't pay rent because you're starving. Out you go. Hundreds of thousands of tenant farmers were thrown off their land. Their homes destroyed so they couldn't come back. Some landlords burned entire villages, cleared the land for more profitable livestock grazing. And Trevelyan? The man who designed this ideological disaster? Queen Victoria knighted him in 1848. Yeah, 1848. Right in the middle of Black 47, while bodies were still piling up. He got a medal for watching people starve. Sir Charles Trevelyan, rewarded for his service overseeing famine relief. The same guy who called the famine divine judgment got honoured by the crown. Let that sink in. Where do people go when they're homeless, starving, and have no options? They leave. 1846 to 1855. At least 2.1 million people fled Ireland. Most went to North America, some to Britain, others to Australia. They packed into cargo ships hastily converted to carry human beings. The coffin ships. These vessels weren't designed for passengers. They were timber haulers, cargo freighters. Ship owners saw desperate refugees and dollar signs, crammed hundreds of people into dark holds below deck, gave them 6 square feet per family, no ventilation, no hygiene. Families slept head to toe in pitch-black compartments. 1 hour per day allowed on deck for fresh air, food, hardtack biscuits, sometimes nothing. Water, stored in barrels, often contaminated, sometimes ran out before landing. Toilets, buckets. Disease ran rampant. Typhus, cholera, dysentery. On some ships, death rates hit 20%. On the worst, 50%. The bark Ajax left Dublin in May 1847 with over 100 passengers. Half died at sea. An emigration officer in Boston said, if headstones could be erected on the ocean on the route of the emigrant ships from Ireland, the sea would look like one great cemetery. Those who died were wrapped in cloth and dumped overboard. No funeral, no grave, just gone. The journey was a nightmare. Imagine being locked in darkness for weeks, the air thick with the stench of human waste. The sound of people coughing, vomiting, crying, children screaming, adults praying, and knowing that getting on that ship was still better than staying in Ireland. Think about that. Conditions were so bad at home that risking death at sea was the safer bet. The ships that made it to Canada docked at Grosse Ile, a quarantine island in the St. Lawrence River. In 1847 alone, over 17,000 deaths were documented at quarantine stations. Thousands more went unrecorded. About 5,000 are buried on Grosse Ile. Mass graves, unmarked. Medical officers stationed there described scenes of absolute horror. People too weak to stand. Dying of typhus hours after arrival. Families separated. Children orphaned. Some died within sight of land after surviving 6 weeks at sea. But even those statistics don't tell the full story. Babies were born at sea in filthy conditions. Between 1846 and 1851, over 8,000 births were recorded on ships arriving in New York. Some lived. Many didn't. Women gave birth in darkness, no doctors, no clean water, surrounded by disease and death. And if the baby survived? They entered the world as a refugee before they could even open their eyes. The journey took 40 to 60 days, 2 months in hell. And when survivors finally reached America, filthy, penniless, often illiterate, they faced discrimination and hostility. No Irish need apply signs were common. They were treated as lesser, diseased, undesirable, but they survived. And their descendants built communities that changed the course of American history. Today, nearly 40 million Americans claim Irish ancestry. Most trace their roots to the famine years. Back in Ireland, the catastrophe continued. Total death toll over 7 years. Estimates range from 800,000 to 1.5 million. Most historians settle around 1 million. 83% of victims in the hardest hit areas were rural poor, Irish-speaking, indigenous to the land. The Irish language, spoken by half the population before the famine, was gutted. By 1900, only 15% still spoke it. An entire culture nearly erased. And Britain, in 1999, 154 years later, President Clinton apologized for American inaction. In 2011, a US official apologized directly to Ireland. Britain, no official apology. Ever. Some British politicians still argue it was just a tragic natural disaster. Nothing anyone could have done. Tell that to the historians who documented the food exports. Tell that to the families still looking for records of ancestors who vanished. Tell that to the millions who fled on coffin ships because staying meant death. This wasn't a natural disaster. This was policy. Trevelyan and Russell chose laissez-faire economics over human lives. They chose ideology over compassion. They watched people starve while food sailed past them. And when it was over, they gave the architect a knighthood. 1 million dead. 2 million refugees. 4 million people erased from Ireland's population. Because Britain valued profit margins more than Irish lives. So next time someone tells you the free market solves everything, remember Ireland. Remember the million who didn't make it. Remember the 2 million who risked everything on coffin ships. And remember that sometimes doing nothing is the cruelest choice of all. If this story shook you, there's more where that came from. More wars, more famines, more conflicts that shaped the world in ways you never learned in school. Hit subscribe. We're just getting started.